Welcome to Know About Crimes, where we uncover the most chilling and perplexing mysteries in criminal history. Today, we're diving into a case that has haunted the city of Houston, Texas, for nearly 6 decades, the Icebox murders. Fred and Edwina Rogers seemed like an ordinary elderly couple, living a quiet life in their modest home. But on June 23, 1965, their peaceful existence was shattered by a discovery so gruesome it shocked the entire nation. The police, responding to a routine welfare check, stumbled upon a scene straight out of a nightmare. Fred and Edwina had been brutally murdered, dismembered, and their remains were chillingly stored in their own refrigerator. Who could have committed such a heinous crime? And what happened to their son, Charles Rogers, who vanished without a trace shortly after the murders? Was he the perpetrator, or did someone else escape justice? Join me as we explore the disturbing details of the Icebox murders, examining the evidence, the suspects, and the enduring mystery that surrounds this horrifying case. To truly understand the horror of the Icebox murders, we need to step back in time to the mid-1960s, in Houston, Texas. The Rogers family lived in a modest home in the quiet Montrose neighborhood, an area known for its friendly community and peaceful streets. Fred and Edwina Rogers were a typical elderly couple, or so it seemed. Fred, 81 years old, was a former real estate salesman and had become increasingly reclusive in his later years. Edwina, 72, was more social, known to keep in touch with family, but still lived a relatively quiet life. The couple's home was modest, a small one-story house that blended in with the rest of the neighborhood. On the outside, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. But inside, the atmosphere was different. The Rogers' son, Charles Rogers, lived with them, though he was rarely seen by neighbors or even family. Charles was an enigmatic figure, a World War II veteran and a geophysicist by profession. Despite living under the same roof, he communicated with his parents mostly through notes slipped under doors, and he kept to himself in his upstairs bedroom. This unusual family dynamic set the stage for what would become one of Houston's most infamous and unsolved murder cases. The Rogers home, once a quiet refuge, was about to become the scene of an unimaginable crime, one that would leave a permanent scar on the neighborhood and remain a mystery for decades. On June 23, 1965, the peaceful facade of the Rogers home would be shattered forever. Concerned relatives had been unable to reach Fred and Edwina for several days, prompting them to request a welfare check from the Houston Police Department. When officers arrived at the Rogers residence, they found the front door locked, but there was no immediate sign of anything amiss. After gaining entry, they walked through the quiet, dimly lit home. Everything seemed in order, no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, nothing to indicate that something was wrong. But the silence was unsettling. As the officers moved deeper into the house, they noticed that the kitchen had a strange, pungent odor. It was coming from the refrigerator. One of the officers cautiously opened the fridge, expecting to find spoiled food. Instead, what they discovered would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Inside the refrigerator were several packages of what appeared to be butchered meat, carefully wrapped in newspaper. But upon closer inspection, the officers realized this was no ordinary meat. They were staring at the dismembered remains of Fred and Edwina Rogers. Their bodies had been cut into pieces, drained of blood, and placed in the refrigerator like grotesque leftovers. The officers were in shock. The sheer brutality and cold precision of the crime was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Further investigation revealed that Fred's head had been crushed by a blunt object, while Edwina had been shot execution-style. The dismemberment had taken place in the home's bathroom, where blood splatter and tissue remnants were found, indicating a gruesome and methodical cleanup process. The heads of the victims were never found, adding another layer of horror and mystery to the case. The discovery of the bodies sent shockwaves through Houston, leaving both the police and the public reeling. Who could commit such a brutal and calculated crime? And why were the bodies preserved in such a chilling manner? As investigators combed through the home, the focus soon turned to the only person unaccounted for, Charles Rogers, the couple's reclusive son. But as they would soon discover, finding Charles would prove to be an even greater mystery. With the gruesome discovery of Fred and Edwina Rogers' dismembered bodies, the Houston police launched an intensive investigation. The crime scene was meticulously examined, but the brutal nature of the murders and the careful disposal of the bodies left investigators with more questions than answers. The first thing detectives noted was the lack of blood in the kitchen and living areas, despite the violence inflicted on the victims. This led them to the bathroom, where they found traces of blood, tissue, and bone fragments. It became clear that the bathroom had been the primary site of the dismemberment. Whoever committed the murders had taken great care to clean up, but the thoroughness of the crime scene suggested that the killer was someone with knowledge of how to cover their tracks. Attention quickly turned to the Rogers' son, Charles Rogers, who lived with his parents but was nowhere to be found. Charles was an enigma. He had a brilliant mind, with a background in geophysics, and had even worked as a pilot and seismologist. However, he was also a recluse, rarely seen by neighbors, and communicated with his parents only through notes slipped under their doors. As investigators delved into Charles's life, they discovered a man with a mysterious past. He had served as a Navy pilot during World War II and later worked for oil companies as a geophysicist. However, by the early 1960s, Charles had seemingly withdrawn from society, resigning from his job without explanation and cutting off contact with friends and colleagues. Despite living in the same house as his parents, he maintained an isolated existence, retreating to his upstairs bedroom and avoiding any interaction. The police searched the home for clues about Charles's whereabouts. They found his bedroom in disarray, with maps, journals, and strange coded messages scattered around. It seemed that Charles had been planning something, but what? And more importantly, where was he now? As the investigation continued, a picture of Charles began to emerge. Some speculated that he might have been suffering from mental illness or paranoia, possibly exacerbated by his isolation. Others suggested he might have been involved in secretive or even illegal activities, given his background in geology and connections to the oil industry. But despite the mounting evidence pointing to Charles as the prime suspect, there was no clear motive. Why would he murder his parents in such a brutal fashion? And why had he gone to such lengths to preserve their bodies in the refrigerator? Investigators began to piece together a possible timeline of the murders. They theorized that Charles, perhaps in a fit of rage or under the influence of delusional thinking, had killed his parents, dismembered their bodies, and meticulously cleaned the crime scene to cover his tracks. But as thorough as the investigation was, they could not locate Charles Rogers himself. He had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of questions and a house of horrors. Some speculated he had fled the country, possibly to South America, while others believed he might have met a more sinister end. Despite numerous sightings and leads over the years, Charles Rogers remains one of the most wanted fugitives in Texas history. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation stalled. The lack of concrete evidence and the mystery surrounding Charles's disappearance meant that the case began to grow cold. But the questions lingered. What really happened inside the Rogers home? And where was Charles Rogers? To understand the mystery of the Icebox murders, we must take a closer look at the man who quickly became the prime suspect, Charles Rogers. Even before the gruesome discovery in his parents' home, Charles was a figure shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Born in 1921, Charles Rogers was a highly intelligent individual with an impressive resume. He earned a degree in nuclear physics from the University of Houston and served as a pilot in the U.S. Navy during World War II. After the war, Charles worked as a geophysicist for major oil companies, a job that took him around the world. He was known to be brilliant, but he was also a loner, someone who preferred solitude over social interaction. By the early 1960s, Charles had become increasingly reclusive. He resigned from his job without explanation and seemed to withdraw from society. He moved back into his parents' home in Houston, but even there, he kept to himself, rarely interacting with Fred and Edwina. Neighbors reported that they barely saw him, and even close family members described him as a ghost, a man who was present but invisible. Despite his intelligence and professional success, Charles exhibited strange and paranoid behavior. He communicated with his parents only through written notes slipped under their bedroom door, and he spent most of his time locked away in his upstairs bedroom, surrounded by maps, journals, and coded messages. Some speculated that he was involved in secretive government work, while others believed he was spiraling into mental illness. Charles's disappearance after the murders added another layer of intrigue to the case. Investigators found his car abandoned near the Texas-Mexico border, leading to speculation that he may have fled the country. Some theories suggest that Charles, using his intelligence and military training, was able to create a new identity and escape to South America. Others believe he may have been involved in a covert operation and was silenced by powerful forces. But Charles Rogers' mysterious life and sudden disappearance have given rise to more than just speculation. They fueled countless conspiracy theories. One theory posits that Charles was involved in the JFK assassination, using his skills as a pilot and geophysicist to assist in the cover-up. Another suggests that he was part of a clandestine operation related to his work in the oil industry, and the murders were somehow connected to this shadowy world. However, the truth remains elusive. Charles Rogers has never been found, and his whereabouts, if he is even still alive, are unknown. Despite numerous leads and supposed sightings, the trail has gone cold, leaving us with a man who remains as much a mystery today as he was when he vanished nearly 6 decades ago. Who was Charles Rogers? A brilliant but disturbed man who brutally murdered his parents? A fugitive living under a new identity in some remote corner of the world? Or a pawn in a larger, more sinister game that cost him his life? The mystery of Charles Rogers continues to captivate and perplex, making him one of the most enigmatic figures in true crime history. As with any high-profile unsolved case, the Icebox murders have given rise to a host of theories and speculations. While the investigation focused on Charles Rogers as the prime suspect, many questions remain unanswered, leading to a range of intriguing and often chilling possibilities. 1. Charles Rogers as the sole perpetrator. The most straightforward theory is that Charles Rogers was indeed the killer. This theory posits that Charles, struggling with mental health issues or driven by a hidden motive, murdered his parents in a fit of rage or paranoia. His meticulous dismemberment of their bodies and the careful cleanup of the crime scene suggest a premeditated act. Some speculate that Charles might have been suffering from a severe psychological disorder, which drove him to commit such a brutal crime. His subsequent disappearance could have been an attempt to escape the guilt or the consequences of his actions. 2. Government conspiracy or secret life. Another theory involves Charles's background in geophysics and his secretive behavior. Some suggest that Charles might have been involved in a government conspiracy or clandestine operation that played a role in the murders. Given his connections to the oil industry and his knowledge of sensitive information, it's possible that the murders were connected to his professional life. Was he silenced because he knew too much or because he was part of a larger, secretive agenda? 3. Charles as a victim of a larger plot. An alternative theory is that Charles was framed or became a victim of a larger plot. In this scenario, someone else committed the murders and planted evidence to incriminate Charles. The idea is that Charles, with his reclusive nature and enigmatic background, was an easy target for someone looking to deflect suspicion. This theory also suggests that Charles's disappearance was part of the plan to divert attention and confuse investigators. 4. Family dynamics and financial motives. Some theories explore potential family dynamics or financial motives. Was there a hidden financial or personal conflict between Charles and his parents? Could there have been a dispute over money, inheritance, or family secrets that led to the murders? This theory looks at the possibility of a more personal, less public motive driving the crime. 5. Other suspects and connections. Lastly, there have been suggestions that other individuals might have been involved. Could there have been accomplices or other suspects who played a role in the murders? Investigators considered various angles, but no concrete evidence pointed to anyone else. This theory keeps the door open to the possibility that Charles may have had connections with people who were involved in the crime. 6. Theories of escape and survival. Given Charles's intelligence and background, some believe he might have used his skills to create a new identity and escape justice. Sightings of Charles have been reported over the years, but none have been confirmed. Could he still be alive, living under a new identity, or did he meet a different fate altogether? As we explore these theories, it's essential to remember that without concrete evidence, these speculations remain just that, speculations. The true story behind the Icebox murders may be far more complex than we can imagine, and the mystery of Charles Rogers continues to captivate and puzzle true crime enthusiasts to this day. As we wrap up our exploration of the Icebox murders, we are left with more questions than answers. The case of Fred and Edwina Rogers remains one of the most chilling and perplexing mysteries in true crime history. The brutal nature of the murders, the eerie discovery of their dismembered bodies, and the enigmatic disappearance of their son, Charles Rogers, have all contributed to the case's enduring intrigue. Despite an extensive investigation and numerous theories, the true motive behind the murders and the whereabouts of Charles Rogers remain unknown. Was he the sole perpetrator driven by personal demons or a hidden agenda? Or was he a victim of a larger, more sinister plot? Could he have escaped justice, or did he meet a different fate? The mystery of the Icebox murders is a stark reminder of how some crimes defy explanation and evade resolution. While we may never know the full truth, the case continues to captivate and haunt those who delve into its dark depths. As we reflect on this disturbing case, it raises broader questions about justice, the nature of evil, and the limits of our understanding. What drives someone to commit such heinous acts, and what becomes of those who vanish without a trace? Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most unsettling cases of unsolved murder. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to know about crimes for more deep dives into the world of true crime. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.